Thanks, Kareem. John, the president has been pushing for a peace deal, a ceasefire, for weeks, if not months. Now that he has announced that he's not running for another term, how, if in any way, that complicates those efforts to reach a peace deal?
We don't believe it does. And in the conversations that we've been having in just recent hours, there's no reason to suspect that his decision not to run for re-election is going to have an impact on our ability to get the deal done. What's going to have an impact, as I said before, is leadership. Leadership on all sides and the ability to continue to compromise. We are close. We just have to finish it.
The president also last night spoke about his goals in his remaining 6 months in office. One of those goals is to get back those wrongfully detained Americans, people like Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal.
And Paul Whelan.
And Paul Whelan, exactly. The president has been described by some as a lame duck president. Does it complicate those efforts to get back those wrongfully detained Americans?
I can assure you that we continue to work extremely hard at getting all the wrongfully detained Americans around the world, including those in Russia that we've been talking about, getting them home where they belong. They don't need to, there's no reason for them to be detained. The whole team is working on this around the clock. I can absolutely assure you that.
Thank you for the answer also on the last question. Yesterday, Netanyahu asked the U.S. to fast-track weapons in his speech. I'm wondering if the president is considering lifting his pause on the 2,000-pound bombs that the Israelis have requested.
No change to that policy at this time, and I would just add that that is the only shipment of the only type of weaponry that has been held up, that all the military security assistance that had been going to Israel continues to go to Israel. They are still getting the tools, the capabilities, and the weapons that they need for the fight that they're in.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Greg. What conversations has President Biden had with Vice President Kamala Harris ahead of her meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister?
I won't speak to private conversations between the president and the vice president. I wouldn't do that on any given day, and I'm certainly not going to do it starting today. The vice president, I'm sure her team will give her a readout of how the conversation between the president and the prime minister is going right now, and that will, I'm sure, inform her conversation, but I'm not going to get more detailed than that.
And just second question, what additional pressure is the president willing to exert upon Netanyahu, just given that the framework, as my colleague mentioned, was just submitted about a few weeks ago and still nothing has come of that?
The framework for the deal? Mm-hmm. I mean, my goodness, there's, I know we're not there yet, and I get that there's more work to be done, but think about what has happened since he laid that out on the 31st of May. We went from that framework proposal to getting the framework itself agreed to now by both sides. There's some haggling that's being done over some of the details. Some of that haggling has had positive result, and we have closed some gaps. There are still gaps that remain to be closed, as I said earlier, some details that need to be worked out. There's an awful lot of energy and effort being put into this, certainly by our team, but I'll go so far as to say by our counterparts as well.
Good, Jake.